Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. We're going to get started right away so that we can stay on track and keep moving along with these amazing talks. So our first presentation after lunch is called Coatings for Exhibition Mounts, a deep exploration of a superficial process. Shelly Uhlir is the exhibit specialist and Mountmaker at the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian. She has been making mounts since 1981 and has been a staff Mountmaker in the Conservation Department at the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian since 2021. Shelly is extremely involved in training the next generation, which is very important, I might add, of Mountmakers, and being a large part of the International Mountmakers Forum, including serving on the steering committee as well as many, many other things. Shelly?
Well, first I want to clarify, I started in 87 or 8, American, so you gave me a few extra years, so thank you. All right. Hi, everybody. So, today I'm going to be talking about mount coatings, going from all that amazingness this morning to something really simple in our lives. The QR code that you see here references a document that has all the links and everything that I'll be talking about today. So since I'll be going through things quickly, don't worry about trying to get them in during the slide. And this QR code will come up at the end too. So when I use the term mount coatings, I'm referring to the layer of material that enrobes the base metal before the padding goes on or the final finished painting is applied. Coatings are not the same as padding materials for the purposes of this talk and are usually not meant to be in direct contact with the object. My personal mount coating palette is a simple one, honed from years as a freelance mount maker and then as a staff mount maker with irregular spray booth access. When the weather is dry and not too cold, I spray Krylon Crystal Clear generally. If it is too cold or wet outside, I use a 15% B72 and xylene stip, or I have been using that. Both would be outgassed at least 4 weeks. This kit has served me well for brass mount making over the past number of years, but I'm always on the lookout for useful, less toxic alternatives. The spark for this deep dive came from a conversation with conservator Stephanie Gadera, who at the time was an Andrew W. Mellon Fellow in Objects Conservation at NMAI, doing research into protective coatings for archaeological silver. Part of the goal of her research was to find coatings that would flow nicely without bubbles or streaks, which is a natural fit with our goals in brass mount coatings. Plus, she was willing to share her findings, formulations, and expertise with me, so that gave me the confidence to go forward and kind of dig in a little bit on this. But before we got too far in exploring Steph's suggestions, it was important to have a clear understanding of what people were already using. So in February 2024, some of you may remember that I sent the IMF Mount Coating Survey to all of you. Happily, a whopping 84, which is a lot, mount makers and allied colleagues from around the world responded. Here are some quick basic stats. The majority of us are using brass as our primary support material, as well as stainless and steel, of course. And when we do use brass, most are using an acid bath to clean it still, but sandblasting and abrasive scrubbing are also used. There's nothing too surprising with any of this, but it's always good to know what the current standards are and what people are doing. So of the 84 who answered, thank you so much for helping with that. For those who do use a primer or coating, the majority use a spray method to apply it. I did find it interesting that about 11% of people who responded do not coat or prime their metal at all. The brass, I'm assuming. So let's examine that option first. I have to admit that the idea of using no coating at all for brass mounts sounds great to me because it would be nice to reduce solvent use, but I also find it a little bit unnerving somehow, like this guy. So I asked a few metals experts about it, and the consensus was that for brass mounts, coating is not necessarily critical as long as everything is clean, acid-free, displayed, and stored in a stable environment with no chance of galvanic corrosion. So, for those with more control over their environments, no coating at all could be a nice choice. That would have made for a very short talk today, but for most of us, there are many times when a coating or a primer is still recommended. Coatings, of course, can reduce the chance of corrosion, improve paint adhesion, fill surface defects, and generally clean up the aesthetic look of the mount. So it still seemed useful at that point for me to explore other coating options. There were 4 other main families of coatings that kind of came out from the survey. So let's take a look at each one more closely. About 21% of those surveyed report using a powder coating. And when I use these percentages, it's not like it all adds up to 100%. Obviously, all of us use different things, sometimes for different situations. But 21% said that they do sometimes use powder coating, which is very durable and can be great for pins and smaller mounts. It does create, or it can create, a rather thick result and can be tricky to get to melt evenly, depending on your setup. But some people are very good at it, and it works really well for them. Currently, I couldn't find any powder coating materials that had recently been approved for long-term use. So I'm hoping some of you will share information if you do have some. But the Plascoat product here passed ADI test for short-term use at the American Museum of Natural History in 2021. If you know of a better one, please do let me know. About 10% of those surveyed have used or do use chemical patination for their mounts. It's not exactly, it is coating, but we're counting it as just for this talk. This offers a durable overall color that is often used on mounts for natural history specimens, private collections, and galleries, but some art museums also like this look. If you're interested in learning more about this process, one of the videos from the IMF's 2020 virtual mount painting workshop goes into it in more detail. Mr. Jamie Haskell taught a class that it's called Spritz Techniques with Acrylics. So hidden in there, about 13 minutes in, is a very nice description of how he uses the chemical patination. So that's good to see. Sprays are the most popular coatings at 78% of those surveyed. Krylon and Rust-Oleum products were by far the most widely used, but people also reported using Plastidip, Liquitex Spray, Vallejo, Montana, SEM, and Halford's brands. There's no denying that these are convenient and easy to use, but they also introduce the most material complexity. Because their recipes are proprietary, it can be challenging to determine what is safe to use. So, I first took the list of the different products people were using, and I know there's a million different colors and all that, but I just took primers and clear coats to the AIC wiki site to see if any had test results already published there. This is a site that anyone can easily access. It's free. It's updated from time to time. I first searched by the word spray. You can search by anything you want. And then I sorted by test result so that materials that passed as suitable would rise to the top. And here's a list of what I found that day. At first glance, it seems like there were a lot of suitables, but look closer at the dates of the tests. Generally, only those that have been run within 5 years are considered trustworthy because of potential formulation changes, etc. So that took 2 out of the running right away for the purposes of this talk. There's also a group that are almost at the 5-year mark. So for this talk, I had to kind of set these aside, even though they're right on the edge, and I'm hoping that they're either retested and will be republished or something's gone on with there. But it still leaves 3 solid ones, and in my opinion, that was a pretty good start. And these were all tested. It says FMNH, that's the Field Museum who did that testing. At around the same time, Jennifer Bosworth, exhibition conservator at the Smithsonian National Museum of Asian Art and co-leader of the AIC's Materials Fact Sheet Working Group, contacted the IMF to discuss possible future collaborations on mountmaking materials. If you aren't already aware of the wonderful work the Materials Fact Sheet Group does, please be sure to talk with Jen directly because she is here at the conference. I don't know if you want to raise your hand now or just we'll seek you out later. There she is. Thanks, Jen. Needless to say, this was a very timely dream come true for us. And immediately, this collaboration was incredibly fruitful. Members of their group offered to run a few ADI tests for us, but time was short, so we needed to narrow our choices to 5 to 6 products. Since the Krylon and Rust-Oleum already had fairly recent results online, we decided to focus on the 6 that hadn't been tested at all yet. The National Museum of Asian Art and the Library of Congress ADI tested the Zinsser 123, the Liquitex Neutral Gray 7, the Vallejo Black Primer, the Montana Universal Primer, and the SEM Gray Primer, the Surface Primer High Build. The Field Museum was kind enough to ADI test the Plastidip and the Montana. So here are the results from the NMAA ADI testing, which to me demonstrates the complexity of deciphering these results and why we love our conservators who can do this. So first, look at the coupons from the control group. Notice how the black Vallejo primer coupons, or now notice them. They changed minimally, but they did change. So they could only be approved by NMAA for temporary or 3 to 6 month use. The SEM samples had a slight white corrosion on the lead, so that needs to be either retested or compared with results from other labs before a final decision can be made. But please notice the broken, disintegrating lead samples, very dramatic for the Zinsser and Liquitex. The lead coupons detect for aldehyde and acidic gases, and I think that this visual makes clear to even this non-conservator that these are an obvious fail for use in closed cases. It's like, I kind of love seeing dramatic results like that, because then it's like, it's clear, right? Here are the results from the Field Museum for Plastidip and Montana primers. Note that the Montana failed in both the NMAA and the field tests, so I'd say that's pretty conclusive for that product. The Plastidip, when cured for 4 weeks, received a limited use rating from the field. It isn't recommended for long-term use or with sensitive materials, but this was honestly way better than I thought, way better news I thought we'd get for something called Plastidip, because it just sounds like it's wrong, right? The National Gallery of Art and the Library of Congress also ran 5 of the sprays through a GCMS test. All 5 coatings showed a lot of off-gassing of amines and acidic compounds, so unfortunately, neither institution recommends using these coatings near sensitive collection materials. This might sound like a bunch of bad news, but that's not how I am choosing to see it. The good news is that we currently have 3 sprays that are considered suitable after at least 4 weeks of outgassing. And based on recent tests, we have a couple of potential choices for temporary use with non-sensitive materials. However, I find the unsuitable results valuable too, because they give us a clear idea about which products may be to avoid for use in closed cases with sensitive collections. So what's next for the sprays? There are several next step ideas to discuss, but the most exciting from my point of view is that we are planning a virtual gathering in 2025 with the Materials Fact Sheet group to get Mountmakers and conservators and whoever else wants to come together to specifically discuss Mountmaking materials. And I've been to a few of these for other materials, and they're really awesome. So, yeah, look forward to that in the future. So some of you at this point might be saying, well, I've been using some of these materials for years without any noticeable issues. And there are a variety of reasons why you might not have seen any dramatic visible damage. A few are listed here. For example, the volume of coating material that we have on mounts is usually pretty small compared to the case volume of air. So less material equals less volatiles in the case equals less potential problem. Also, the risk lessens when there is good air exchange, like if things are on open display or in more kind of leaky cases. But the truth is that you might not be told that damage has occurred. For any number of reasons, it might, even if it has been discovered yet, the information might not get back to you. I know that there's not one person in this room who wants to damage either the objects or their reputation. So in my opinion, the more that we know, the better for everybody. And finally, moving on to our last coating family, about 20% of those surveyed used a dip coating. These can be diluted into a spray also, but for these set of experiments, we kept them as like a thicker dip. They are generally prepared for us by conservators, but Mountmakers can do it too. If you know how to use a scale and a tea bag, you can probably mix your own. I'm sure there's lots of info out there if you are interested in giving it a try, but here are 2 to start with. There's an article by conservator Stephen Koob and one from paleo artist Tom Sermon. I know there's a lot more out there, but these were 2 kind of different ways of approaching the same thing in different kinds of terminologies, so they were interesting to me. And here we are back at Steph's research. The criteria for these tests were first, that the materials be easy for a Mountmaker to find, afford, prepare, and use. Beyond that, the coating needed to flow well with minimal bubbles. Ideally, the cured result should adhere to the metal well with flexibility enough to withstand a little bit of tweaking on site if we need to do that. And finally, it needed to take acrylic paint well. It's not too much to ask, is it? And here's the list that we came up with. 3 failed our criteria right away, so no point spending time on them right now. And I can talk to you elsewhere about it. It's just not worth talking about in this time period. The remainder are shown from left to right, top to bottom, in order of solvent toxicity. B72 and xylenes was my starting point, and we know that that's like one of the most awful in terms of toxicity. So there's that. And then I also use B72 in an acetone ethanol mix that I know a lot of people are already using. Our other concoctions were B67, which is a polymer that dries harder than B72, but is more easily soluble, so it might, if people are having a hard time with the cheesecloth dipping, soaking tea bag method, we thought, try this, see if it made any difference. We tried Gamblin's Gamvar Gloss, is a varnish used in paintings conservation that I just had in my cabinet, so I thought I'd give that a try. The B48N that BJ and Richard had mentioned earlier is formulated to adhere to metals, and it's also formulated to be somewhat flexible, so that's kind of a no-brainer to give that a try. We put it in acetone because that's so notoriously, it evaporates so quickly, so it's notoriously bubbly. So we thought we'd make it really hard on that one. And then the Bootvar 98 in ethanol was a later suggestion from conservator Lauren Horlick. This is something that's normally used in hide or wood repairs due to its flexibility, but we wanted to see how it would work on non-porous materials like the brass. And finally, we tried 2 water-based polymers, Jade 403 and Roplex B60A. Once we had our mixtures decided, each recipe was brushed or dipped on a variety of shapes and sizes of clean brass, plus a few mylar strips. During the application process, I was checking for ease of use, flow, and thickness of coating. After it cured, I checked for flexibility and adherence to the metal, as well as any discoloration or corrosion. And finally, a line of red acrylic paint was brushed on part of the coated straps, as you see in the lower right picture. After it dried, I tried to scratch it like with my fingernail, with a scribe tool, kind of trying to create what might happen during installation. And here are the results. It's a lot and way too much to go through this second, but I do have some visuals. The jade and full-strength Roplex were removed because they both created discoloration on the brass where the material pooled thicker. The B67 went into the retest pile because the Stoddard solvent that we had mixed it in is still pretty high up on the toxicity scale, and I found out it can be explosive. I didn't know that before. So I feel that the B67 is worth trying again, but maybe not with that solvent. The Bootvar 98 had yellowed in the jar, which I didn't love. Nobody loves that, as you can see, but the film was extremely flexible, so I think that's worth a redo also. And the thinned Roplex discolored the brass slightly, but it seemed like it could be useful for coating pins, if that was done right. And finally, the B72 in acetone ethanol, it cured very brittle, and I think it's just because it evaporates so quickly, with masses of bubbles. But I know a lot of people use this, and they use it successfully, so it's like user error on my part, so I'm not going to dismiss that out of hand. So that leaves these 2. In my opinion, the Gamvar gloss worked great. It created a thin, flexible coating that was easy to use and left minimal streaks or bubbles. However, because the recipe is proprietary, we aren't definite on what it's made out of. The best guess is Laripol A81, and I don't know what the solvent is, but also people guess it's something like mineral spirits, but this would require separate tests to see how that would work. But still, it worked great. You can see on the little bent strap. I thought the B48N also worked well. It was easy to mix, highly flexible, and the result on the smaller strap was great. Don't judge by the right-hand thing. I had glopped stuff on really thick just to see what would happen. I don't know why I was being so mean to the B48N, but on the actual mount strap, you can see there's a few bubbles, but it's really not bad, and that's with acetone. So for next steps, I want to compare the flexibility and bubbling more fairly by mixing these 4, the B48N, the B67, the B72, the Bootvar 98, and the Laripol A81 in the same solvent. I might play with that just being acetone, but maybe also acetone ethanol. I'll talk to experts and see. So that seems like a fair thing to do next and see what'll happen. So that's my update on mount coatings for now. But to continue to share and exchange information on all mount making materials, we're working to update the IMF website's materials page. We have a wonderful group of mount makers already on our editing committee. But if you'd like to join us or have information that you'd like included, and I'm sure a bunch of you are like, well, I use this and it's fine, so please share that with us. So that'd be great. Please communicate with us. And then also stay tuned for more information on that virtual gathering with the Materials Working Group in 2025. Having an opportunity to discuss materials directly with conservators right there will be super useful to all of us. And in the meantime, conservators from the Fact Sheet group have joined the IMF website's online forum and have generously volunteered to monitor it for any relevant materials questions. Well, they won't be on call like 24/7, but they will check regularly. And if you don't have easy access to a conservator, this could be a great resource. Once you're an IMF site member, which probably most of you are already, it's easy to post to the online forum, but please, of course, contact us if you need any help. And I hope that helps you, all of this helps you in your own mount journey, or you have something to add to ours. And to everybody listed here, and too many more to adequately credit, thank you for your generosity, time, knowledge, guidance, and patience. And to the 84 of you who took time to respond to the mount coating survey, we all do better when we learn from each other, so thank you. And also, that survey is still open. I just left it open, so if you want to add to it, please do. All those results will be published too on the website. So, not with people's names though. I'm taking that out. So thank you for listening today. Yeah, and in the interest of time, let's move on to our next speaker. You guys can talk to me else at some other time.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. But thank you, Shelly. I think it's really important. I think one of the main points about this whole meeting is sharing all this information. And so I agree with Shelly that if any of you are using anything out there that works great for you, definitely let her know so she can add that to the tests. And it's great to know that the tests are continuing. So thank you, Shelly.